What if I told you the worst year to be alive wasn't during a war or a plague, but when the sun simply stopped shining? In the year 536 AD, the skies went dark, crops failed, people starved, and no one knew why. Fast forward 700 years, and the Crusaders are making their last stand in the city of Acre. It's fire, blood, and betrayal as the Christian world loses its final stronghold in the Holy Land. Two moments, centuries apart. But both mark the end of an era and the start of something far darker. This is the story of how the world can collapse, in silence, in smoke, or in shadow. The year the world went dim, 536 AD. Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping into a time so strange, so miserable, even medieval folks, who were no strangers to hardship, looked up and thought, yeah, something's seriously wrong. But before we dive in, if you enjoy these deep dives into the weirdest parts of history, go ahead and like the video, maybe subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Always cool to see who's tuning in across time zones. All right, lights low. Maybe turn on a fan for that calming background hum. Let's get into it. Picture the early 500s. You're probably a monk, a trader, or just some poor farmer hoping your turnip crop doesn't fail again. Life isn't easy, but at least it's predictable. The seasons show up more or less on time. The sun rises, the sun sets. You complain about it being too hot, too cold, just like people always do. Then, one year, everything changes. The sun starts acting off. It starts small, some cloudy mornings, skies that just look a little wrong. Nothing too crazy. Farmers mutter. People make jokes about lazy gods sleeping in. But the clouds don't move, the sky stays dull. And the light? It's there, technically, but it feels like the sun just isn't trying anymore. Weeks go by. The weird dimness doesn't let up. All across Europe and Asia, people start noticing. And not in a ruined picnic kind of way. This feels serious. Even the Byzantine historian Procopius, who usually stuck to the facts, described the sun as giving off light without brightness. In historian speak, that basically means we're all doomed. Other accounts talk about a dry fog that covered the world. Not smoke, not mist, just a heavy, strange haze that wouldn't move. No wind carried it away. It didn't rain. It just hung there. Quiet, still, eerie. People had no idea what was happening, but one thing was clear. The world was acting wrong. Crops didn't ripen. Trees stopped growing. Birds flew in circles. People tried to make sense of it. Some blamed angry gods. Some blamed witchcraft. Others pointed fingers at solar eclipses or, their least favorite neighbor. One guy probably blamed it on his goat. But no matter the theory, everyone had to live through it. No sun meant colder weather, less food, more fear, and not a clue when or if it would end. The worst decade in history. Justinian, the plague, and a crumbling empire. Let's head over to the Byzantine Empire, and more specifically, to its capital, Constantinople. At the center of it all was Emperor Justinian. He was known for his big ambitions, his strict legal reforms, and his dream of restoring the glory of Rome. And, for a while, things were going his way. He passed the famous Corpus Juris Civilis. He poured money into massive building projects like the Hagia Sophia, and he was reclaiming former Roman lands like he was on some grand tour. But then came the year 536, and everything started falling apart. The skies turned dark, temperatures dropped, food became scarce, Constantinople, a city that depended heavily on imported grain, especially from Egypt, quickly felt the strain when harvest failed. Bread prices skyrocketed, famine crept in, people began to panic. The strange darkness in the sky led many to believe the end of the world was near. Religious leaders warned of divine punishment. Some citizens turned to prayer and fasting. Others turned on each other. Justinian, who had built his image around divine favor, now had to answer the question, why had God seemingly abandoned them? Not a great look for someone claiming to be chosen by heaven. So he built more churches, prayed harder, and probably wondered how it had all gone so wrong. But the worst hadn't even hit yet. In the year 541, something even more deadly arrived. The bubonic plague. It came by ship. It always does. Within a few short years, the disease killed an estimated 25 to 50 million people. That's up to half of the population in the empire. And yes, Justinian himself caught it. He survived, but barely. His health was never the same, and neither was his empire. Rebellions flared up. His military campaigns stalled. Bureaucrats died faster than they could be replaced. Justinian wanted to rebuild Rome. What he got instead was a decade of darkness, hunger, disease, and despair. The plague didn't arrive during a stable, peaceful time. It hit when everything was already falling apart. The sun hadn't returned to normal. Temperatures were still cold. Crops were still failing. And now, the plague was spreading like wildfire. People had no way to understand what was happening. They didn't know about bacteria. They didn't know about fleas or infected rats. All they knew was that people around them were getting sick, fast, and dying even faster. Some people fell ill and died within a day. Others lived long enough to watch their entire family disappear. The symptoms were terrifying: fever, vomiting, and swollen black lumps. And if famine was cruel, this disease felt downright unfair. As the bodies piled up, priests ran out of prayers. Funeral rites were shortened to a few quick words before the next body arrived. It wasn't long before mass graves became the norm. For regular people, peasants, scribes, monks, life became about one thing: surviving the day. The days were still dim. The cold was still biting. The food was still running out. And now, the people around you were either coughing, dying, or already gone. Livestock stopped producing. Crops refused to grow. Markets collapsed. Grain became so valuable that if you had a single carrot and no kids to feed, you were practically royalty. In cities like Constantinople, even the rich couldn't escape the crisis. Nobles went hungry. Entire neighborhoods emptied. Trade slowed to a crawl. Villages were abandoned, and out in the countryside, people just disappeared. Some fled, some starved, some gave up. And with the sun still hiding behind a veil of ash, time itself started to feel strange. Was it morning? Evening? No one really knew. All people could do was keep working, keep praying, and keep hoping that something, anything, might change. But it didn't. Some churches tried to help. Others just demanded more repentance. Nobles hoarded food. Local governments struggled to keep control. Justice became unpredictable. If you stole a loaf of bread, you might get a warning or a sword, depending on how hungry your judge was. Things were breaking down. People turned to superstition. Rumors spread about demons, angry gods, and distant lands where the sun still shone. Entire regions emptied out. Roads crumbled. Fields went wild. Civilization didn't collapse in a dramatic fire. It just slowly faded away, quietly and painfully. Eventually, things began to shift, not suddenly, not dramatically, but over time, the ash in the sky began to clear. A few weak rays of sun broke through. Crops started growing again, just barely. Bread became edible again. Grain prices settled. People started to rebuild. And while the trauma didn't disappear, life began to return. Generations passed. The children who were born after the disaster didn't remember the long, sunless years, but the survivors did. They aged with a quiet, heavy look of people who had seen too much. This catastrophe left a deep mark. Some historians believe the dark tone of later medieval writing, full of doom, fear, and divine warnings, came from these years. After all, it's hard to write cheerful songs about spring when you've lived through a decade of winter. Even as the light returned, people never forgot, and they never fully trusted the sun again. So, what do a darkened sky in the 6th century and a burning city in the 13th have in common? Both moments felt like the world was ending, and in a way, it was. In 536, people looked up and saw the sun fade, not realizing they were standing at the edge of the ancient world. Famine followed. Societies fell, and for many, hope slipped away with the light. Then, in 1291, as Acre crumbled under fire and steel, another chapter closed. The final Crusader city lost, dreams of a Christian Holy Land buried in smoke and blood. Two catastrophes, separated by centuries, but tied together by a simple truth. History doesn't always fall with a bang. Sometimes it dims. Sometimes it's a slow unraveling of light, of empires, of belief itself. And yet, people survived, rebuilt, moved forward, even if they didn't know what came next. Because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's this. Even in the darkest years, the world keeps turning.